When he was having a hard time getting to the first level, he got help from someone in the sky, and the technique that rushed through his mind was precisely the same technique that Kathy was teaching Sophie. This is the basic cultivation technique of human cultivators, Qi refinement technique. Kathy, should I leave? Jacob asked as he realized that Sophie was focused on listening seriously. Eavesdropping on other people's cultivation techniques, even if it was the basic cultivation technique, was considered taboo. It's okay, you can stay, Kathy said. She thought that if Jacob were to leave, Soph would definitely start opposing her. Therefore, she might as well let Jacob stay to make sure everything was in place. Okay. Jacob sat down on a chair nearby. After she recited the technique that was more than 1,000 words, Kathy started to explain it carefully to Sophie. Although Sophie was in a bad mood, she didn't want to give up cultivating, so she listened carefully to every word. On the other hand, Jacob was quietly practicing his own Sword Shadow Scroll and ignored Kathy's explanations. Both Spirit Concentration Scroll and Qi Refinement Technique had the same effects. However, they focused on different types of bodies and had different ways of cultivating them. As 2 hours passed, Sophie memorized and understood the entire Qi Refinement Technique. This surprised Kathy, as she did not expect Sophie to be so talented. Jacob, do you still want to help her with her homework? After a long exhale, Kathy asked Jacob. Not today, we won't have enough time. Jacob summoned Snowflake from the necklace. We should leave now. Snowflake looked around and started rolling on the ground excitedly as it saw the 3 people inside the room. Jacob threw an essence replenishment pill to it. Snowflake turned into the snow lion form. Kathy walked up to Sophie when they started to leave. Don't worry, I will not fight with you on certain things. She smiled awkwardly and whispered to Sophie. After opening the door to the balcony, Jacob sat on Snowflake's back and helped Kathy onto its back as well. Hey, this is for you. Sophie suddenly opened her backpack and took out a pen drive before she threw it at Jacob. Jacob reached out his arm and caught it. This is... You will know when you see it. Sophie closed the door to the balcony. With a loud banging noise, Snowflake carried Jacob and Kathy to the sky. Sophie stood behind the balcony door and started thinking. She walked back to her bed and tried to cultivate the technique Kathy taught her. A shallow white nature essence suddenly gathered around Sophie's body. While Jacob and Kathy were flying toward their college on Snowflake's back, Jade and Julia were visiting the old woman in her house. 1 shabby desk, 1 worn-out bed, and 3 cups of tea. The sisters had been sitting across from the old woman for more than 2 hours. The old woman remained silent, and the twins also stayed silent. You two have the cultivation strengths of 3 lotus petals, the old woman finally spoke. Elder, you have the strength of 4 lotus petals, right? Jade said. Almost. The old woman picked up her teacup and took a sip. Politely, Jade and Julia also picked up their cups and sipped. In the teacup was high-quality grass, which was a spiritual herb with the effect of steadying people's nerves. In the mortal world, there are specific rules. You must abide by the rules, even if you don't belong to this world. The woman put down her teacup and said slowly, Elder, do you want to send us back? Jade stared at the old woman and asked in a measured tone. Sitting next to her sister, Julia blinked. The old woman shook her head. I invited you to my place to discuss the necessity for you to abide by the rules. Rules? Jade looked at the old woman in defiance. You almost hurt our master last time, and we haven't even held you accountable for that. Since we can't seem to agree with each other, more talking is useless. The old woman waved her hand. A strong wind lifted Jade and Julia up. The shabby house was obviously the old woman's storage space. Before they could react, Jade and Julia were tossed out of the house. She's so fierce, Julia looked back at the house and said. When she was in the house a moment ago, she was almost out of breath under the aggressive suppression. We are no match for her right now. We have to endure her for now. Jade pulled her sister up into the sky with a 5-colored energy sphere around them. Although they were top-tier masters in this region, they were no match for the Grandmaster of the Soul Formation realm. At their levels, they didn't need the battle to test each other's strength. By emitting auras, they get a feel of the rival's cultivation strength. The combined strength of the twins was no match for this master. Also, the old woman knew quite a lot of things about the heavenly realm that was above ninth heaven. Meanwhile, Jacob walked Kathy to her dorm building. After putting Snowflake away, he returned to his own dorm with the disc. He borrowed a laptop from one of the guys from the other dorm to watch the content on the pen drive Sophie gave him. As predicted, it was a video of Sophie's performance from last night. When watching the video, he had a different feeling than when he watched the play in the auditorium. Sophie's performance was quite good. Her presence on the stage was grand and fearless. Occasionally, her eyes scanned the audience as if she was looking for someone. Why was she so distracted during her performance? Jacob wondered as he watched. In the second half, Sophie was more focused and recited the long lines smoothly while her movements and expressions were more natural and accurate. Her voice sounded pleasing on tape. One couldn't get tired of hearing it. When the video ended, it was almost time to sleep. Exhaling deeply, Jacob thought that Sophie was indeed very talented and pretty. He kept the pen drive safely in his backpack to take back home on the weekend and show to his grandma. She would love to see her beloved Soph performing so beautifully. Jacob spent half the night cultivating and the other half sleeping. Thursday morning came in the blink of an eye. Susan's course was still being taught by the substitute teacher. During the class, the guys got sleepy and none of them tried to grab the seats in the front. Kathy and he didn't interact much in class, which made the others suspicious of them as they didn't act like a new couple at all. In the evening, they took the bus together and headed to Sophie's home. Today, Dracon was also home. Helen prepared a lot of food for them. Seeing Dracon's stern face, Kathy was a bit nervous. She greeted them hesitantly. "Come in and take a seat." Helen greeted Kathy warmly and ushered her and Jacob into the house. Sophie was already home. She sat on the couch watching a movie. Jacob looked at her closely and found no special radiance. However, her temperament felt different from yesterday. Her eyes were brighter and her skin looked smoother. Although she sat on the couch leisurely, vibrant energy emitted from her. "Dinner's ready. We will be troubling you two to tutor Soph after dinner." Helen held Kathy's hand and pulled her to the dinner table. Her words were aimed at Kathy. After all, after 2 hours of tutoring, Sophie had reached level 1 of the Chi refinement realm in one night. The progress looked insignificant, but it was important to Dracon and Helen. It meant that Sophie could still cultivate despite her loss of the Dragon Core. She could get on a brand new road of cultivation. The more solid her cultivation foundation was, the better odds she would have in successfully receiving the Dragon Core in the future. Dracon sat at the table expressionlessly, stoic as always. However, when he happened to see the faint fluctuations of nature essence around Sophie this morning, he was more excited than anyone else. Since Sophie was back on the road of cultivation, she would be able to take elixir pills without any side effects, and she wouldn't be as fragile as a mortal. Dracon took the television remote and put on the news channel to catch up with the world after a long day. On TV, the local news was being broadcasted. A couple of days ago, Cherry Grove High set a new standard for liberal education by producing a school play. The news attracted the attention of the people at the dinner table. "Mom, it's me!" Sophie yelled in excitement. At the center of the stage, Sophie, in the company of the boy playing Romeo, looked like a beautiful princess. The scene immediately caught the eyes of Jacob and the others. Jacob looked at Sophie on TV before glancing at her from across the table and found that her temperament had indeed improved. This news report ended quickly, but Sophie's excitement was not abated. Half a minute later, Helen's cell phone began to receive calls, one after another. "It's okay. As a girl, it was a good challenge for her. You are too kind. Okay, I'll bring her when we have dinner next time. And you must bring your son. He's almost 5 years old now, right?" Helen finally ended the last incoming call. Obviously, they came from Helen's friends who had watched the news. Helen sounded modest, but her smile showed that she was quite proud. "Soph's performance that day was indeed excellent." Kathy took the opportunity to praise her. Glancing at Kathy, Sophie didn't say anything, as she was secretly pleased with Kathy's compliment. After dinner, Jacob and Kathy walked upstairs with Sophie, one teaching her the basic cultivation technique, while the other helped her with her studies. Due to her appearance on the news, Sophie was still excited, while subconsciously thinking about her classmates' reactions when she would go to school tomorrow. So, she wasn't as sulky as the previous night with Kathy. Instead, she followed Kathy's guidance and circulated the Chi refinement scroll. Then, she quickly finished the test papers Jacob gave her without any unnecessary breaks. They had finished tutoring and were packing their stuff up when someone knocked on the door. "Come in," Sophie yelled. Thinking it was her mom, Sophie's tone was playful. From the look on her face, she wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. However, it was Dracon instead of Helen who walked into the room. Dracon immediately turned to Kathy. "Kathy, you want to make elixir pills, right? I'll take you there."